Hello, my name is Krzysztof Cipora and I'm a lecturer at Center for Mathematical Cognition at Loughborough University. In this lecture, I would like to say something about mathematics anxiety. Is this really a thing and what can we do about it? So what is mathematics anxiety? There are multiple definitions, but this one seems to be the most useful one. So it's claimed that mathematics anxiety is a feeling of tension and anxiety that interferes with manipulation of numbers and the solving of mathematical problems in both everyday life and academic situations. This is relatively old definition from 70s, but it's still quite valid and useful, and several researchers investigating mathematics anxiety still use it. And it's very important here that we have these two aspects of mathematics anxiety, or like when it's problematic. So first we can see some consequences of mathematics anxiety in the academic context, but also it affects our everyday life situations. And some authors claim that mathematics anxiety may meet criteria for a specific phobia. So it could be comparable to like spider phobia or phobia of like big open spaces and so on, even though mathematics anxiety is not placed in any current classification for like phobias or mental health problems. So as I already mentioned in the definition, there are several like aspects of mathematics anxiety. So it could be anxiety which is related to learning mathematics and also to being tested in mathematics. So taking a mathematics examination or like oral exam, or being asked to solve some problems in front of the classroom. And also another aspect, as I mentioned, is this mathematics anxiety related to everyday situations. So for instance, if we need to do some quick calculations to estimate how much a tip we should like give to the waiter, or some other like on the spot quick calculations, for some people it can be also causing some sort of anxiety towards mathematics. So while discussing mathematics anxiety, we need to answer some important questions, and these are the questions which are very, let's say, common sense and intuitive on one hand. On the other hand, these were also the questions that early researchers investigating mathematics anxiety had to answer to kind of establish the field. So first of all, we can ask whether mathematics anxiety isn't just an anxiety, that some people are just anxious of like multiple things, for instance, like a novelty or being exposed to social situations or some evaluations in social context or anything like that. Isn't it like just another symptom of being anxious in general? It seems that it's not, because we have multiple pieces of evidence showing that mathematics anxiety is somehow separate from general anxiety. There are some so-called psychometric arguments showing that mathematics anxiety is something else. For instance, correlations or similarity of scores between different mathematics anxiety measures are much higher, like within each other, than their correlations to scores of other types of anxiety measures. So for instance, the correlation between two different measures of mathematics anxiety would be higher than their correlation with measures of, for instance, general anxiety. So we can say that probably mathematics anxiety is a sort of separate entity, or as psychologists would say, construct. There are also some physiological arguments showing that participants who were screened specifically for mathematics anxiety revealed a different pattern of physiological reactions, which are normally linked to arousal or stress, when they were encountering mathematical problems of increasing difficulty. And this pattern was like kind of gradual amplification of these physiological responses, while such a gradual increase in physiological responses were not observed when they were facing problems of like linguistic nature, also of increasing difficulty. So these like stress was increasing with increasing mathematics load, but it did not change with increasing load or difficulty in problems of another nature. So, okay, we have some arguments that mathematics anxiety is not just anxiety in general, but the other question that we need to ask ourselves, and the researchers had to ask themselves and answer this question, was whether mathematics anxiety isn't just a low mathematics skill. Seems that mathematics anxiety is really separate from low skills in mathematics. First of all, when we take individuals who score high in mathematics anxiety and we ask them to do to solve some mathematical problems, their performance would depend on the testing conditions. Let's say if we frame the situation as a sort of exam or a situation when we apply time pressure, when we tell them to do it quickly, or we kind of emphasize the importance of this, we would see that their performance is much worse than in a situation when they solve the same problems, but when they are kind of presented in a more, let's say, casual or let's say entertaining way, when it's not phrased as like important examination. If this was only about low skills, they would struggle in both situations. However, this drop in performance when they think that it's like, oh, I'm being evaluated, it's important, I need to speed up, is much like their performance in such situation is much lower than when they do it in the like relaxed condition. The other very strong argument which showed that mathematics anxiety is not the same as performance is what happened when some individuals who were scoring high in mathematics anxiety took part in some interventions which were aimed at alleviating, decreasing their anxiety level. So after such interventions, which were targeting specifically anxiety, they were not training like mathematics problems and so on, but rather really targeting this, so to say, emotional aspects of like anxiety, how to cope with this, their performance in mathematics task improved. Which means that, okay, it was not that they were like bad in mathematics and they were claiming that, oh, I'm so scared and stuff like that, but rather really their anxiety was sort of blocking them from solving the task according to their like current knowledge or skill level. So we may also ask ourselves, where does mathematics anxiety come from? And here there are multiple potential sources of mathematics anxiety. Several of them are listed here. First one are genetic factors. Tendency of like being anxious towards like different objects, or just being anxious, or we would say also nervous about like different aspects of our life is sort of determined genetically. The inheritance rate is quite high, so we can think that this sort of like predisposition of becoming anxious is something that we are born with, but of course it doesn't determine it for like our lifetime, but it just makes us more susceptible to perceive our negative experiences, which probably all of us have at some point in our life, to develop this anxiety. Several authors also identify some deficits in elementary number processing, which are, for instance, like discrimination of dots, like how many dots are here, how many are here, or telling where out of the two sets where there are more dots, or comparing symbolic numbers, that they can be kind of predictors of future mathematics anxiety. Another one aspect are unpleasant experiences in early education. So what happens to our schooling, to our teachers, to our experiences, what happens to us in our especially early education. Then the role of parents and the role of early education teachers and the role of gender stereotypes, which are kind of most important here, I would say, because these are those that we have really lots of space to improve. I would focus on them in following parts. So parents, apart from usually passing some genes to their children, they are also strong role models for them, and their negative attitudes towards maths, also including mathematics anxiety, may be adopted by their children. They may be really kind of hearing or believing that, yeah, well, it's hard. If my parents have been struggling, they were anxious, it's hard, it's not something that I can master or so. Yeah, that's something that the children can learn from their parents, who are their very, very strong role models. So yeah, it was bad for my mom. My mom or my dad couldn't do it. Yeah, then probably it's also not for me, but I shouldn't bother. And children are more likely, one study showed, to adapt their parents' negative attitudes or anxiety towards mathematics in families in which these parents were more involved in helping their children with doing maths tasks. This is kind of very, let's say, upsetting. At the same time, it's we can think of it as a sort of paradox, but at the same time, if we can imagine a situation that a parent is supporting the child during the whatever homework or so, and repeats all the time, oh, it's so complicated, oh yeah, I remember, I was struggling with it all the time, yeah, you should not worry, not everyone can be good at it, yeah, well, it's like this. And then if the child is kind of exposed to this very strong role model during early work and some exercises and so on, it can just simply take over this attitude. And the other very strong models at elementary school level, primary school, are teachers. And this is especially the problem in educational systems where there is one teacher who teaches the youngest children all the subjects. And then several studies from multiple countries, from the US, also from European countries. This is data from Germany and French-speaking Belgium. Also our other data that we collected in Poland shows that students of this early education pedagogy studies or early education teachers are a group that reveals very high math anxiety levels compared to math anxiety levels in students of other faculties. And probably several of them selecting these early education pedagogy studies, several of these students actually tend to select work or career pathways related to working with children and so on. And this is also a field of study which is not kind of believed that it's kind of mathematics heavy. Here, in our study that we conducted with German and Belgian pre-service and in-service primary school teachers, we analyzed only females because there is huge majority of women in these kind of faculties or also working in primary school. in both these countries, also very similar in case of Poland. So we just analyzed women only, and it turned out that when we took them like all female teachers and female future teachers and like female students of other faculties, we could see that the effect wasn't very vivid, but at the same time, in both German and Belgian system, the education is for this early education teachers is organized that students, even though they would be in the future teaching all the subjects, they select their majors. So they could major either in language or in mathematics or in arts or in like other, let's say, fields. And those who were taking mathematics as their major of specialization, they were relatively low in their mathematics anxiety, but those who were selecting other majors, their mathematics anxiety was like way higher than students from other faculties. So it seems to be the problem. It's also very important that we know that the effect of teachers in early education settings in primary school seems to be like more harmful to girls than to boys, because some studies show that it's especially girls who like take over this strong role model of their like woman teacher who might be mathematics anxious, and they can be also like increase, and this could lead to their increase in mathematics anxiety. And then we go to the gender effects. Girls typically report higher mathematics anxiety levels than boys do. There are multiple reasons for that, but this is very important to know that this difference in like scoring higher in maths anxiety questionnaires does not translate to girls' lower maths performance. So this is more like a difference in anxiety itself, not in mathematics performance. Why it's the case? Like one of the problems can be the maths gender stereotype. That is this stereotype, or belief that some people have that mathematics is not something that women can do. And unfortunately, this stereotype perpetuates, and like according to some ideas, it's just that this is one of the reasons that why we observe higher mathematics anxiety in girls and in women than in boys and men. On the other hand, we might also be asking ourselves whether it's that they reveal higher anxiety level, or it's just that they are more openly reporting their anxiety than boys. And this is also like a bigger debate on anxiety, not only in context of mathematics anxiety, but in general, whether it's that women, girls experience more anxiety, or they are just kind of socialized more into being more open about about reporting this anxiety. So this is something we still do not know. However, it's worth remembering that there is quite strong gender effect when it comes to mathematics anxiety. And another question we should discuss here is, when does mathematics anxiety start? So early studies suggested that it develops during primary school, especially like when the material is getting more and more complicated, and then it's getting like more harder and harder to catch up, and then like we experience some failures and so on, and in some individuals these failures kind of translate into like mathematics anxiety. However, later evidence shows that one can observe maths anxiety as early as in preschool. So this is something that we also need to keep in mind, especially in the context of what I was telling about the like origins of mathematics anxiety, that some individuals may be like prone to anxiety, and this can be observed even earlier than than the like negative effects of anxiety on performance, because this is another observation and another relatively strong a piece of evidence about mathematics anxiety is that the correlation between maths anxiety and maths performance increases in development. So it's getting like more and more linked with each other when we get older. And how long does it last? So it seems that mathematics anxiety is present throughout education, and it affects career choices still at the university level. So we can observe that highly math anxious individuals tend to avoid mathematics related courses, mathematics related career paths, also at the university level. And there are more and more studies that are showing the effects of maths anxiety goes way beyond academic contexts. So people who like out of education system still seem to be suffering from mathematics anxiety. It's like not only about specific problems of low numeracy, which is connected to like mathematics anxiety or might be connected to mathematics anxiety, but it has been also shown that mathematics anxiety, for instance, affects risk assessment and decision making, or some shopping decisions, or, for instance, administration of medications when we need to estimate the doses and so on. So this is kind of real life situations where we can observe that mathematics anxiety is a thing, and it doesn't stop when we stop attending mathematics lessons. Therefore, it's really important that we are aware of the problem and we try to face it somehow. So we know that there is some link between mathematics anxiety and mathematics performance, but the problem is, and it's still part of the debate, what comes first, whether it's mathematics anxiety, which is causing lower mathematics performance, or it's the other way around. And indeed, researchers have investigated all the possible scenarios, and there are some arguments for each of these. So first, we have so-called deficit theory, which tells that poor mathematics skills are leading to some failures, to experiencing some failures in doing mathematics, and this leads to mathematics anxiety. This is, of course, quite plausible mechanism. However, there is like one more model which tells that it's rather that mathematics anxiety leads to lower mathematics skills, that it prevents us from learning and it prevents us from like mastering mathematics, and this is called debilitating anxiety model. And of course this one is also quite plausible at the, let's say, common sense level, and at the same time these two models are kind of mutually exclusive, because one of them tells that it goes in this direction, the other one that it goes in the opposite direction. However, nowadays these models are not very strongly supported on their own, and the bulk of empirical evidence comes in favor of reciprocal model, which emphasizes the role of this bidirectional effects that mathematics anxiety causes, like poor mathematics skills, but at the same time like not succeeding, being like continuous failures and so on, also perpetuate the mathematics anxiety, and we have this so-called vicious cycle that like these two problems kind of amplify each other. At the same time, what I wanted to stress here is that mathematics anxiety is not just does not imply low mathematics performance. So typically the correlation between mathematics anxiety and mathematics performance is estimated to be at around 0.3. If you recall some like statistical measures, correlation of 0.3 is like at best moderate effect. We would rather say that it's a relatively weak relationship. So This means that like not everyone who is math anxious needs to score low in mathematics, or it doesn't also imply that people who are low anxious, they would need to be very, very good. There are some highly math anxious students who are doing good in mathematics, probably despite their mathematics anxiety. However, this is quite understudied group. We are working to better understand what happens to this group, why they are not kind of affected by their mathematics anxiety, and even though being mathematics anxious, that they are doing very good in mathematics. At the same time, even less studied group would be the group of students who are low maths anxious, even though they are not performing very well in mathematics. So what I want to stress here in particular is that we should not treat that, okay, if someone doesn't do good in mathematics, then the person for sure would be maths anxious, not at all. And also we should not say that if someone is good, that they are not experiencing any sorts of mathematics anxiety. Of course, it doesn't translate to their performance, but it may well affect their like mental well-being, their stress levels they experience on the daily basis. So it also shouldn't be ignored whatsoever. So what is the scale of the problem and who is mathematics anxious? This is very fundamental question, but at the same time very difficult to provide a straightforward answer to. So here we can see a figure with distribution of mathematics anxiety scores as measured with abbreviated mathematics anxiety scale. And we can see that the distribution of these scores looks more or less like the normal distribution, like the Gaussian curve. So it's this distribution is close to normal, and we do not have like two groups of like anxious and non-anxious individuals. It's rather a continuum, and from some point, most likely this starts being more and more detrimental to individual, that this like anxiety is getting more and more like problematic to an individual. So this means that sometimes we need to distinguish or to decide who is mathematics anxious. We need to rely on so-called statistical criterion. What does it mean? So when it comes to like answering the question of who is math anxious or what is the prevalence of mathematics anxiety, there are like two approaches. One of them is like looking at in whom this problem or in whom mathematics anxiety is a problem. And here there is like large variation of these estimates between like different authors, with some authors claiming that majority of the population might encounter some negative feelings towards mathematics, and maybe this is already something that we should address. Even if it's not affecting their performance, it can be well like causing some unnecessary stress and like decreasing their well-being. At the same time, based on PISA data, it's up to 30% of individuals who strongly agree that they get very nervous when doing mathematics problems. So it's like one in three roughly would say that they get very nervous when doing mathematics. It's quite a lot, and maybe this is also something that we should already think of addressing somehow. Some other estimates from older studies show that it's around 11% of the university student population that needs some intervention to handle with this with their mathematics anxiety. Their math anxiety is so high that they would benefit from some counseling. So, however, like in which way we look at it, it seems that this problem is sort of prevalent and not something to be ignored. And just one more issue here when discussing the prevalence. Sometimes authors are relying on a purely statistical criterion that they, for instance, consider as math anxious, like top 10% of individuals who are scoring like high in mathematics anxiety. And this is quite useful, helpful for research, or maybe even for differential for individual diagnosis. However, this doesn't help us estimating the prevalence of mathematics anxiety, right? If we treat that top 10% of individuals is math anxious, then we cannot say that it's like that the prevalence of math anxiety is 10%, because we are kind of chasing our own tail. Basic research on math anxiety, which is like aimed to, for instance, compare groups of high anxious and low anxious individuals, sometimes just screen a large group of individuals with one instrument, and they define the top quartiles for comparison. This is also quite useful for research purposes on one hand, because in each study we can have some individuals of like high anxiety, some of the low anxiety, but this creates in the long run kind of serious problem of between study comparability, because we in one study define that like bottom quarter is low anxious. However, in another study, individuals who score with the same questionnaire at the same levels could turn out to be like highly anxious groups. So this is something which is really still far from resolved in basic research on mathematics anxiety, and this is also very important to keep this in mind. So how can we measure mathematics anxiety? First, like group of instruments which could be useful here are self-descriptive questionnaires, which seem to be sufficient. They have good psychometric properties, they are easy to administer, they are freely available. There are even some norms available. On the other hand, there were also quite some physiological measures, like for instance skin conductance or EEG or fMRI, functional magnetic resonance. But in my view, they are more sort of proof of concept or demonstration of some physiological correlates of mathematics anxiety, or proving that it has this, let's say, more like harder evidence for mathematics anxiety, harder one could say, or demonstration of a principle, and they are not very well suited for practical reasons, because first of all, reliability of those measures at the individual level is rather low, and at the same time it's like really complicated and expensive to administer. So self-descriptive questionnaires seem to be good enough. How do they look like? Here I wanted to present two very popular scales. One of them is called Abbreviated Math Anxiety Scale, AMAS, which looks like this. The items are not particularly tricky or kind of deceiving. Participant is just answering some questions about the anxiety, which would be related to doing several things, such as using tables at the back of the book, or listening to a lecture in math class, or listening to another student explaining mathematics formula, and so on. And this scale has like two subscales of learning and mathematics learning anxiety and mathematics testing anxiety. At the same time, it seems that participants are quite good in evaluating their mathematics anxiety level in relatively accurate way, even if we just ask them a single question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how math anxious are you? And these scores would be quite well linked to both like scores of more sophisticated questionnaires or to some other educational outcomes that they would be supposed to be linked. Of course, this doesn't allow this nuance whether this anxiety in learning context, testing context, everyday context is kind of imbalanced, but at the same time, we can see that individuals are kind of good in having insight into their mathematics anxiety. So we know who is who might be math anxious, what would be the measurement, what would be the potential causal models of anxiety, and so on. And now I would just like to spend a few minutes on consequences of mathematics anxiety. I already told about the mathematics anxiety in performance links, but at the same time, Mark Ashcraft, one of the pioneers in mathematics anxiety research, tried to build a more thorough model of consequences of mathematics anxiety. And then he divided them into two aspects of avoidance. The so-called global avoidance would be linked to avoiding mathematics in the long-term perspective. So for instance, highly math anxious individuals would be likely to select career pathways which are, let's say, as low mathematics loaded as possible. So for instance, not selecting STEM subjects, rather some other domains, or lowering number of math lessons or courses within their curriculum that they take, and so on. So this would be this long-term consequence. And the other one, called local avoidance, would be linked to individuals willing to get out of this stressful, unpleasant situation of doing mathematics. And this is what Ashcraft proposed, that individuals who are highly math anxious, when they are anyway placed in the situation when they need to do some mathematics problems, mathematics exam or so, they would be likely to take some actions to get out from this stressful and unpleasant situation. That is, that they would rather try to solve the test as fast as possible, not caring that much about accuracy, just to get out from this unpleasant situation. And of course, if they are stressed and they are speeding, what they focus on is actually that they just get out from this negative, unpleasant situation. They of course sacrifice their accuracy, and therefore they would score lower in all the tests and measurements. And of course, for future career prospects and so on, this is also very, very negative. Another aspect when it comes to exam, or any situation when individuals need to do some mathematics in any other situation, is so-called choking under pressure. That is kind of being blocked and having this problems of bringing your thoughts together and being concentrated on the task and so on, and just being sort of distracted and blocked within this situation. So we cannot use all our resources to sort of face the problem. And the other consequence that is quite often discussed in the literature is how mathematics anxiety affects our working memory while doing mathematics tasks. This is another, let's say, theory of how mathematics anxiety affects performance during exams. So according to this model, it's that individuals who are highly math anxious just spend some of their cognitive resources, which would be otherwise necessary for solving the mathematics problems. They are kind of allocating these resources to dealing with this anxiety, or to processing these so-called worrisome thoughts which appear all the time. Okay, it's so bad, I will not manage it, it's so hard, I will fail. And at the same time, it seems that they are kind of handling dual tasks. They need to manage their worry and try to solve the task. And of course, if they allocate several of their mental resources or working memory into the worrisome thoughts, then they have fewer brain power to handle the task, and this also ends in their lower performance. So as we can see, these consequences can be very, very wide, and even though we don't fully understand which of these mechanisms actually play a role, we know that especially in these examination situations, mathematics anxiety can have very, very bad effects on individuals. So how can we help in such situations? So there have been multiple ideas or intervention programs to target mathematics anxiety. And several interventions has been inspired by psychotherapy aimed at targeting specific phobias. So the researchers were kind of taking some ideas and inspirations from therapies targeting phobias like spider phobia or agoraphobia or something like that, and they tried to use these principles to help highly math and anxious individuals. And the most efficient of those interventions were those which were using behavioral and cognitive behavioral approaches. So this really is very, very strongly rooted in the psychotherapy of phobias and anxiety disorders. There were also several ideas of short-term interventions aimed at alleviating mathematics anxiety, for instance, before the important exam. They were either based on relaxation or so-called cognitive reframing, that participants were asked to or trained to reinterpret their body signals related to anxiety, such as, for instance, sweating hands or some other unpleasant feelings, as rather signals their body gives them that it's ready for the effort and so on. Some other interventions were using so-called expressive writing, when the participants were asked to describe their negative feelings just before the exam. And some studies showed that such short-term interventions were effective in lowering the anxiety and helping the students do better. However, to be fully honest here, these studies or these interventions need more evidence that we are sure that they do work. There are several attempts to replicate or to repeat studies that reported such effects, and they were not successful. So in that sense, I would be reluctant at the moment to really encourage any of these as an efficient manner to target mathematics anxiety. The empirical evidence really needs more we need more data, we need more research to see whether such interventions do work, how strong their effect is, and whether it's something we should use in the large scale in educational practice. But what can we do as teachers to face mathematics anxiety? So first of all, it's really important to just be aware of the problem, to know that mathematics anxiety is a thing, that it's not just an excuse for laziness, for being unprepared, for being not motivated enough maybe. And also, in the context of supporting students, it's also good to remember that sometimes very well-intentioned support, for instance, we see that someone is struggling with mathematics, maybe the idea is, okay, maybe we should give the person some more exercises to do and so on. But if the student is really highly math anxious, this can be, of course, counterproductive. If they are anxious and what they see as the support from the teacher is doing even more maths, can be counterproductive, and maybe we should try to really focus on the anxiety rather than that. However, as I mentioned already, it's not always that mathematics anxiety equals low performance. So it's also maybe important to know that maybe our good students are actually kind of very nervous and so on, and maybe they would also need some support, even though they are doing good, but it can cost them a lot. And maybe if we help them, if we do something around this, we could also they could also benefit a lot, and they could also then be more likely to pursue mathematics related career pathways, that their spectrum of possibilities is wider. What is also important here for teacher is to make the parents aware of the problem, make the parents aware of mathematics anxiety, but also to make them aware that they are very, very strong role models for their children. That is, the way they speak about mathematics to their kids and what their own attitude is that they present while whatever kid comes and asks for some help or some explanation or something, that it really matters, and this can have also very profound effect on how the child sees their learning, their mathematics achievement, and so on. So that's all from my side. Thanks so much for your attention. I would also like to thank all the colleagues with whom I'm working on math anxiety. It's quite a long list, but special thanks go to my PhD student, Serena, for all the discussions on the topic of mathematics anxiety and also the feedback she kindly gave me to these slides.